Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Late Night Leo's Talk Leopard Gecko Breeder Life with Steve Sykes of Geckos, etc. This is your host, Morgan, and my co-host, Sam. Sam, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone.
So, Sam, tonight we've got one of the biggest, probably the biggest breeder in California in the West Coast. We've got Steve Sykes. Steve, you want to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone.
So,
thanks for having me on, Morgan and Sam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I mean, taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the little show, it's great for all the listeners. But,
no problem. My pleasure.
I know everybody knows the whole leopard gecko thing, but how did you exactly get started and then later evolve that into actually starting a leopard gecko breeding business?
Yeah. Well, for me, it started much the same as it does for everyone else in a small corner of my bedroom. I've in this year, it's been 18 years since I've been breeding geckos. And it started off just breeding normals and jungles, and that was back in the late 90s. So a jungle was very special at that point. But anyway, it started off, I got just a few leopard geckos. It was a group that I bought out of a classified ad in the back of Reptiles magazine. Anyway, started with those. I was just breeding them and selling the babies to, local pet stores. When I moved to California, I was living in New Jersey at the time, but I moved to California in 2000. And shortly after that, I started really getting into morphs and, was buying a lot of expensive geckos and building the original founding stock for all of my projects. I was still working in a bedroom at that point. At that time, I was a graduate student at UC Santa Barbara, and I feel bad for the people that I lived with at that time because I was not the best roommate to have, but anyway, they'll have some interesting stories and hopefully not too much counseling needed. But anyway, it started off. I just had one side of my bedroom was racks, and then built from there, and eventually I had to get rid of my bed, and so I would end up whenever I had to sleep, I would leave my house and go to my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Deborah, go over to her house to sleep because I didn't have any room in my bedroom for my bed anymore because I had too many racks with too many geckos, and I had some snakes and turtles and that kind of stuff as well. But anyway, after I left graduate school, Deb and I moved into a house in Southern California, and I was pretty excited. I now had 2 bedrooms I could fill. And, we lived there for about 2 years, and in that time I quickly filled those 2 bedrooms and then started spilling out into the living room. That was a small house, but anyway, we moved up to Northern California. We live near Sacramento now. We moved into a big house, or bigger house at that time. And so I had, 2 bigger bedrooms that I started with, but eventually we converted the garage. I quickly filled that. We had geckos in the dining room and in the living room, we just kept expanding and growing. And eventually we had racks running down the hallways, and then in our bedroom as well. So it was getting intense, but we were doing well. We were seeing a need and a reason to expand, and we just kept growing. So. And additionally, at that time, we were also wanting, we saw that we were going to be having kids in the near future. So, we ended up buying an industrial warehouse. And that's where we moved most of the stuff over to the warehouse. Even to this day, we still have some animals at my house. But most of the stuff is over our warehouse. So that was, 2007? We got our warehouse, 2008, I guess. But anyway, and then so it's not too big of a place, 2,700 square feet. It's our first warehouse. And then in 2012, the warehouse next to our current warehouse ended up opening up, and we ended up buying that one, and so now we have the two warehouses that are side by side, and they're units within an industrial condo, so they're basically connected by the wall, so they have a common wall. So basically, when we bought the second unit, all we had to do was create a doorway between the two units, and then we ended up having double the space. So it worked out perfectly. We're at this point, I'm kind of thinking I need another bigger warehouse somewhere else, but just kind of trying to figure out the best direction to go in terms of when and where to get that done.
Wow, that sounds like pretty much everybody's dream. It went right for you.
Yeah, well, I certainly. The interesting thing is, I certainly had plenty of luck on my side. I made some really good investments at the right times. I got into a lot of projects right at the ground floor. I was one of the first people to buy Enigmas, one of the first people to buy Max Snows, and one of the first people to buy Raptors and Aptors, and so I was able to ride those waves. And one thing people need to realize with reptiles is that it takes a long time to make a profit, and to really, get yourself in a good place. Not only with your equipment, cages and racks and all that are very expensive, but also getting your breeding stock where you want it to be, but also your reputation and your customer base and all that. It takes a long time to get that in place. So, the tough thing for people when they're starting out is they're expecting to make a profit right from the start, and it's not going to happen. And the interesting thing is that it's not going to happen in any business. If you start a restaurant, it's going to take you years before you finally get yourself to a point that you have a stable, thriving business. And I think as we've all seen in the reptile business, people come and go, and they get into it with big aspirations. The reptile business is definitely very different than any other business. It's intense. Some people can think I'm living the dream job, but it's a lot of work. I'm basically I'm the type of person that I'm working from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to bed. There's always something that I'm doing. Even in a moment of relaxation, there's still something on my mind of, got to get this done or whatever. There's always something to do. And fortunately for me, I've been a reptile person ever since I was 4. I've literally kept reptiles as pets ever since I was 4 years old.
Steve? We lost Steve. So we're losing a lot of people. We lost Sam too. But it's a very interesting show so far. I love that Steve was able to, do basically what we all want to do. And while I've got everybody here, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors, Luxurious Leopards, Holly's Homebird Reptiles, Top Notch Leopard Geckos, Iron Ice Geckos, Designer Geckos, and SD Geckos. And don't forget to check out the new cutting-edge Leopard Gecko book by Ray Roner of Designer Geckos called The Leopard Gecko Advisor, available now on Amazon, or for a signed copy, go to their website at designergeckos.com. Steve, I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, lost you. Anyway, I guess what I was saying was, it takes a while to get going in the business, but certainly it takes a lot of work. It takes but I guess what I was saying, for me, I've been a reptile person ever since I was 4. So yes, this was a lot of work. Yes, it took a long time to get to a point where I was, I felt stable in my career, I guess. But certainly it's worked for me, but it's certainly been a lot of work.
Yeah, I know that, next year's going to be my 5th season, and if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out.
Indeed.
I mean, they think that it sounds to, all reptiles all the time, but and then you got a real job and the geckos, and it's crazy.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, my recommendation to most people, just for sanity, is to keep your reptile business, you know, basically at a hobby level. You know, where it's kind of a secondary income. It doesn't matter if you suddenly had an incubator fail, you know, a thermostat fail and took all your eggs for the season. You know, it's not too big of a deal because you have a job, you know, that can help support you. You know, certainly there's money to be made in reptiles. There's lots of fun to be had in reptiles, but, you know, keeping it as a hobby that pays for itself and then provides a bit of income as well is a lot simpler, and you know, there's a lot more fun involved in reptiles when you're doing it at that level. You know, getting to a larger level where you're really doing it as a business. I mean, it's there's so many, you know, tax returns and government things and, you know, employee stuff and you know, all of these various things that you know I do. You know, to be honest, you know, I end up doing little of the actual hands-on care of the animals. You know, I have 10 employees now that take care of all the animals, and, you know, I've been certainly very blessed that I have a great staff. You know, they're really, you know, it's taken years to have all of the right people come together. But, you know, I have a great staff that truly love animals. You know, they're all reptile people. You know, they've got a great eye for, you know, knowing what to do and when to do it. You know, they basically, I don't really instruct them on what to do. You know, I just basically order the food and the supplies, and they take care of it. You know, but I mean, it's done through, you know, just you know, I have various managers. I have one manager who's in charge of kind of telling people what to do, and other people that, you know, will oversee their individual sections and just make sure that the animals are getting all the proper care. So, I've ended up doing a lot of other stuff rather than the actual hands-on care. So, yeah, that's just what happens when you get to a higher level of production.
Yeah. Do you ever go through and just like look at your animals? I mean, yes. And what's interesting is, you know, basically I'm opening a box, and it's probably the first time I'm seeing that animal. You know, I certainly enjoy it. You know, I end up going through and, you know, just poking in this box, poking in that box, and, oh, we got to get this on the website. Oh, let's keep this one. Oh, I have someone who wants this right away. Let's get this on the website now. And, you know, so it's certainly fun to go through and you know, see all the little babies growing up at, you know, the various stages, and, you know, see all the animals developing. Yeah, that's. Do they allow you to have like a holdback type sticker, like a green sticker to put on the one you want for holdback? No, Steve, we're out of green stickers. No more holdback.
Well, we use lots and lots of tape. So there's never an end to the supply of tape, and if we run out of tape, then I just order more. So, you know, I don't necessarily do all the selections myself as to who to hold back. You know, my other employees, you know, they've developed a good eye for the projects, and, you know, I mean, if they see something spectacular, they know it, you know, because they're seeing the other ones that, you know, maybe, you know, aren't showing, you know, they're nice, of course, but they're not showing an animal that's going to provide us with the next step forward in terms of, you know, color or pattern or whatever that we're shooting for in a particular project. So, I mean, that's something that is very important is, you know, I mean, having the employees understand what we're shooting for with particular projects, and then that way they're able to say, okay, this is a great one. You got to see this. You know, they're seeing it on a daily basis, but I'm not seeing it. So, you know, they know when they've found something special that, you know, that needs to be shown to me. You know, and certainly there have been other things that have come around that they see something interesting and they go, hey, what do you think about this? You know, we can take this and, you know, go in this direction with that. And certainly they presented me with some great ideas that we've, you know, fully implemented.
That's probably a good thing you don't see them all, because then you want to keep them all. I have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I definitely know how that goes, and actually when I'm going through, actually the way that I flag keepers, I flag it on the box, but additionally I'll make a list. And then, it'll be months later, I'll be looking back at my list and, going, I don't remember that actual animal, so I can go back to the box and, at that moment, and even put a date next to it when I found this animal and what I was thinking at that time as to why I wanted to keep it. But anyway, I end up, not everything ends up getting bred just because there is so much that I do want to keep and breed and all that. So these, my lists, I'll end up going through them later in the year when it's time to put breeders together. And, not necessarily everything gets bred, but, I go back and review it at that time.
Yeah. Are there any secret projects that you'd like to share? Anything that your employees have found this year?
Not necessarily any. Well, I kind of subscribe to the method of keeping it quiet until I'm ready to show it off. And so, certainly if I have something to share, I'd let you know. At this time, we certainly have some things we're working on. We have a couple of things we're trying to play with and prove out and see if it's a gene or if it's line bred or, it's certainly some interesting things we're working on. Just to develop different morphs, and projects don't necessarily turn out the way you expect. You can have something that you're sure is going to prove out to be genetic, and then it just doesn't end up, it turns out to be just, a minor fluke in that animal that isn't something that you can reproduce into its offspring.
Yeah. Are you working with any of the Tide type projects, not the total Eclipse, but any of the other weird things that have been popping up?
The project that I would say, holds that for us is our non-het Eclipse bloodline. And those, it's interesting, and there was I got them actually from Brittany Goodgin for Pack Herp when she was getting out of it. And so started with that. I was interested to have them just because it was a pure bloodline of Eclipses. But I had someone later on contact me and say, oh, you're working with this bloodline I heard. And, oh, yeah, I used to have that one. And those are the pied Eclipses. And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't know that, Brittany certainly had referred to him that way. But anyway, certainly for us, they do show a lot of, white on the heads. Where our big focus with them hasn't necessarily been to increase the amount of white. For us, it was a relatively colorless bloodline. I mean, they have their own special beauty, but in terms of tangerines, they're kind of lacking in the tangerine department. So we've been breeding them to some line-bred tangerines. We have a kind of a special tangerine bloodline that, we will end up releasing soon. But it's kind of been a kind of a special secret ingredient for us in adding color, into bloodlines. Because one problem we have with tangerines is that many tangerines are, it's certainly in terms of super hypotangerines, the tangerine is closely tied to the hypogene, the dominant hypogene. And, that's a powerful gene that, if you put it into something, if I was to put them into my Eclipses, I suddenly lose all spotting, and I'm creating, tangerine Eclipses, but they're super hypotangerine Eclipses, and other projects where you want to preserve the jungle patterning, but you want to add color in, you can't use something like a super hypotangerine. So what we have is I guess I can say the name. We're calling them sunbursts, and it's a line-bred tangerine that is, basically what my goal for this project was. It's a very old bloodline that I've refined for a very long time. Is the best way to say it. It's a line-bred super hypo tangerine that originally the stock, and this was about 12 years ago that I started with this. But anyway, the stock originally came from the gourmet rodent, who was, one of the founder of super hypo tangerines. They're the one who originally designed and developed super hypo tangerines. But anyway, I wish I could get all of my stock back from years ago. It's kind of that those genetics are just lost because they've been crossed into, super hypos, and so you just lose the spotting. Back then, they were selling, I remember in Daytona, I was working at a friend's table, and this was, like 2001, 2002. I wasn't vending myself, but I was working at someone else's table. But anyway, they were selling super hypos, for like, $1,000. But they had spots all over the head, kind of a yellowish orange body color, a little bit of carrot tail. That was top of the line super hypos back then. At the time, getting something like a Baldy was super special, super expensive, and so everybody wanted Baldies. And then we had the dominant hypo gene that comes from the Ray Hine hypos in the UK, and so and they had the carrot tail. So everybody wanted an all orange gecko with an all orange carrot tail. So everybody bred their super hypo tangerines that had spots on the head but good body orange to their Ray Hine carrot tails that had kind of a yellowish body color but amazing carrot tails. Everybody bred those together. Eventually we got the super hypo Baldies with great carrot tails, but meanwhile we'd lost the two original components, being the line bred super hypo and then these really cool awesome pure carrot tails. So anyway, and after a while, Baldies are certainly relatively common now. Almost more common than super hypos that have spots on the head. So anyway, my goal with the Sunburst project was to create a really awesome tangerine-colored animal. I wanted to, it's a line-bred hypo gene, so most of them have spots on the head, no or just a few spots on the body. But additionally, the one problem we have with super hypos. Originally the goal was to get a just solid orange animal. Well, okay, we've done that, a million times over now. So let's have something different. So my goal was to get a orange bodied animal, but that had a lot of mottled diversity of color within the body. So they have super cool orange, they have yellows, greens. I mean, originally what we called these were the green super hypos is what we called them, and then eventually settled on kind of the in-house name. We call them the greens. Not all of them are green, but certainly a lot of them, have some really cool green tones to them. But their body color is really just a mottled mix of orange, yellow, and greenish tones. So super cool. It's something that I've been working on for a while, and we've used them as a kind of a special ingredient in certain projects where, and it's a non-het bloodline, of course, because it's so old, and we've just kept it pure, just breeding within the same bloodline. So it's been very useful to us as a non-het outcross bloodline to work with when we want to put color into a project. So it's been good. So back to eclipses, that's how I started on this tangent, was our goal with the eclipses, with our non-het eclipses, that have the pied heads and all that, our goal is to increase the orange in them. So we've used the Sunburst bloodline to work on that, and it's provided some good results in the first generation, but really where you're doing something where you're taking a bloodline that's not too colorful and putting it into a tangerine bloodline, in the first generation, you'll see some results, but really nothing super spectacular. it takes several generations beyond that to really get, the fantastic tangerine tones that you're looking for to come in.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty cool when it's all done.
Definitely.
Do you expect you'll have some visual of what you're looking for next year?
Well, the answer of what I'm looking for next year, always changes. So certainly, this year we got our first. This was our first year, our first generation where we were seeing the babies from the sunburst outcross, and they added some orange and all that to it. But I remember that the first one hatched, and I was talking to my facility manager about it, and we were going, wow, okay, this one looks really cool. And we kind of watched that one grow up, and we looked at it not too long ago, and we're like, okay, it's nice. It's nicer than its original Eclipse non-het parents. However, it certainly has a long way to go to really produce something that's totally spectacular. So certainly it's not. It's a work in progress. I consider all of my projects to be a work in progress. Every year we always pick some of the best ones to be our breeders, to step all of our projects forward.
Yeah.
So certainly, who knows? 5 years, that'll certainly be an awesome bloodline. Or even 10 years, even better. But then I'll be wishing that I could go back to the Eclipse non-hets that didn't have much color, But we'll probably end up. I like to preserve bloodlines, So who knows? I'll probably keep the original Eclipse non-het bloodline going, in its pure form, and then keep that separated from these tangerine Eclipse non-het stuff that we're working on as well.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about how husbandry in a large facility works? Because I'm sure it's going to be a whole lot different than Timmy down the street with a leopard gecko in his 10-gallon tank.
Certainly. Yeah, we do things, on a large scale. We've been experimenting with various things and they're leopard geckos. You think everything about their care because it's a basic leopard gecko, but we learn something new every year, and we do something totally different every year, just based on what happened the prior year and something that we want to fix and do differently. So it seems like every year we're changing something, and even within the year, supplementation or different watering for babies and all these things kind of change just based on, well, wait a sec, this isn't quite working out right. Let's try this differently. So I guess we've done various things. Certainly, we use racks. We are, we've tried different things. Last year we were housing babies in groups. In racks, 28-quart Rubbermaid style racks. That works, but you have some problems with it, in terms of competition between different animals. You have males that will eventually become of age and need to get moved out, and before they start, fighting. You have tails that get nipped. You have, all kinds of various stuff that can happen. So this year we've tried something different, and that was based on, talking to other breeders that do things on a large scale. And so what we did this year is we house all the animals individually. So all the babies are housed individually in a rack made by Bars, Doug Barr. And so anyway, we house all the animals individually. I know this is not the popular. I guess I'll say this, and I'll preface it by it certainly has worked. What we've done, we're housing all the animals individually, but starting as babies, but we're actually housing them on a calcium sand. So that actually, I know the sand debate, I've heard that up and down, all that. Well, and even years ago, I experimented with housing babies on sand, silica-based sand, and that, did not work. I did, someone told me, oh yeah, I have those babies on sand, no problem. And I'm thinking, well, I know that you can house them on sand if they're adults, but not as babies. But my friend's saying it can work, so okay, I'll try it. And sure enough, I tried it with 2 babies. One of them got, had started developing a impaction, and okay, fine, we'll stop that. So I never tried it again. But what we do, it's actually this. I wasn't the one to develop this method, but it was a gourmet rodent produces animals on a very large scale, and they produce a lot of leopard geckos. And I actually, visited Bill Brandt last year. I took my facility manager, and we went to Florida to go see his facility. And this is his tried and true method, and it works. He houses all the animals individually. They're on a calcium carbonate substrate. He gets it from a mine. In his area, his calcium carbonate substrate is, he's in Florida, so it's a limestone product. For us, we get it from a mine. We buy it by a 1-ton. They call it a super sack. It's huge when it comes and gets delivered on a truck with a forklift and all that stuff. And anyway, we get it from a mine, and it's a calcium carbonate substrate. We put babies on it, and it works fine. With the thousands and thousands and thousands of babies. Well, not that many thousands, but we produce thousands of babies. We haven't had any that have been had impaction problems. So this was our first year doing that. This is how they start off life. We keep them on this. It works well, because they're in moist places. If you keep babies in moist paper towels, and they just mold, and it gets fouled and all that much quicker than if it's kept on a inorganic substrate like the calcium carbonate. It's crushed limestone basically that we're using. So anyway, that was our huge. I spent lots and lots of money this year on buying all these new racks to house all of our babies individually. But certainly, it's been a lot better. We don't have babies that are, competing with each other. Each animal has its own place. They're not. We don't lose tails or toes and all that. You don't have. Certainly taking pictures. It's been. Or you don't have animals that are chapped up. If you're taking pictures of a little guy and they're, 8 geckos in a box or something, you have them having chapped up skin that, ends up not looking so good for pictures. They have beautiful skin, and their colors have been better as well. So anyway, certainly that is different than how other people are doing it, and it's for us that was a huge change. It was different than how we did it last year.
Do they eat the sand at all? Have you noticed if they lick it or? Obviously we're not. We open a cage, we dump the food in, we dump the water in, we make sure they have their vitamin and mineral supplement, and then we close the cage. So we're not necessarily watching them to see are they eating it or are they not, and the cages are not crystal clear. But it is. We haven't had any that have died with a big, fat, hard, concrete belly, that would indicate that they died from a calcium, from ingesting and being impacted. So, you see all these sand debates, and, I don't necessarily want to get involved in sand debate with anyone. However, the interesting thing is that, leopard geckos, as we all know, are programmed to eat substrate when they become deficient in calcium. And if you keep them on a substrate like, silica sand, plate sand basically, and they end up being calcium deficient, then they'll just start eating the sand, and, the plate sand provides no mineral no mineral benefit to them. So they're deficient in calcium. Their brain's telling them to eat sand. They're eating it, but they're not getting anything. So their brain tells them to eat more, and they just keep eating and eating. And that's how certainly, we've seen these horrible pictures of animals that are totally loaded up with sand. That's how that happens.
You know, I mean, the grain size obviously plays a part. You know, the grain size that we work with our sand is very fine. So even a baby could eat it and not have any problems. But, you know, I think that the calcium composition of this sand makes a difference, in that, you know, if their brain is telling them they need calcium and they eat some, they're satisfied. You know, certainly it's not a substitute for their calcium and vitamin supplement. They still need that. You know, that's an absolute necessity, even when they're kept on calcium. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a question in the chat. Why
sure.
sand and not just use like paper towel?
The sand is much easier to deal with. We've tried paper towel. We tried paper towel to start, but you know, babies need a lot of humidity, as we know. You spray a paper towel down, and keep it moist. Number one, it's going to hold that moisture for longer than you want it to. Number two, it's going to start degrading. You know, it's organic, so it's going to start rotting and turn into a moldy, you know, nasty sludge that's going to end up, you know, being very harmful to the gecko. So having them on an inorganic substrate, you can get it as wet as you want. It's not going to mold. You know, we found that it diffuses the moisture quicker. So if we spray the babies down, but that moisture dissipates with time, you know, quicker than it does if we use paper towels as the substrate.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially if you're working with a larger amount of animals. I mean, I could imagine the trash bags full of paper towels.
Yes. Well, we have a dumpster that's basically just for us. You know, we share the dumpster with 2 other businesses, but they actually don't even really generate any trash. So the dumpster is basically just for us. You know, we've been good. They actually had to increase the dumpster pickup just because we were generating so much trash when they were doing it once a week. That we were actually getting complaints that our dumpster was stinking too bad, and I'm thinking, well, hey, if there's gecko poop in there, what do you think? You know, what do you expect it to smell like? So anyway, they increased the pickup frequency, and everybody's happy now.
Did you want to talk about breeding on a large scale and let us know how all that?
Sure. I mean, I don't necessarily think we do anything differently than others, or at least other. You know, the procedures that we have in place in my facility are started off as the basic procedures that I used when I was doing this. You know, I was doing everything myself in my home. And then when I brought employees in, you know, I taught them how to do it. You know, and certainly they've had lots of great ideas over the years, where, you know, I show them how to do it, and they say, well, what do you think about doing it this way? And I go, wow, that's a great idea. I never thought of that, and that ends up being something that's incorporated into our procedures. But I mean, in terms of doing the breeding, we're you know, pretty similar to how we were doing it at my house. I mean, we breed 1 male to 3 females in a 28-quart Rubbermaid container. You know, with a 1 egg box in there. You know, I don't, you know, with my projects, I don't necessarily know, since I have 3 females in the box, I don't necessarily know who the mom and the dad is of each egg that's laid, you know, because there's 3 females in a cage. And if it's a project where we have, you know, multiple males, you know, breeding to multiple females that are all genetically identical, or at least, you know, where we would know what the genetics are of the babies from the phenotype that they're showing us, you know, we'll even put all those eggs together in one box. You know, so if we have 3 boxes where we're breeding reigning red stripes together, you know, we might even be using those, we might have 3 males for those 3 boxes. You know, we end up moving those 3 males between those 3 boxes just to make sure all the males, you know, all the females get to see a male that's going to get the job done. But anyway, all those eggs from those 3 boxes may all go into the same incubation containers, and they may all hatch out. They will all hatch out together at the same. So we know what they are genetically, but we don't necessarily. If someone says, "Hey, can I see the mom and the dad of this one?" We go, "Well, we can tell you what they are genetically, but we can't tell you what they are. Can't give you pictures of the exact mom and dad for these animals." So we incubate. So anyway, we have lots of projects. Various things that we're, obviously you see on our website, we have, nearly all morphs of leopard geckos. So that obviously each of those has to be incubated separately. So we have lots of incubators. We use large freezers that I take and convert into incubators. I don't know how many of those we have now. It seems like every year I'm building at least 1 or 2 of them to add to the collection. But anyway, so it's definitely a lot of work. There's during the egg laying season, basically have an employee who's just going around the room collecting eggs, and then once he gets back to the one side where he started, it's time to start going around the room and collecting again.
Yeah, that would be a fun job, though. Are you hiring?
Definitely. Well, if anyone is in the area and interested in working for us, we actually are hiring. And certainly even if we weren't hiring, if the right person came our way, we certainly would be interested in seeing if there was something we could do to plug them into a position. So, yeah, certainly, we often are hiring. And it often feels like we always need, one more person, to get to where we want to be. But it's just kind of it's definitely a challenge. That's definitely one of our biggest challenges is just, getting the right people into the right positions. That's I see this often to my employees. For the right person, this is a dream job. For the wrong person, this is a nightmare. Dealing with thousands of mealworms and crickets and roaches and, gecko poop and all that. You get the wrong person in here, this would definitely not be, this would be a nightmare. But, certainly we've, just finding the right people, it's definitely taken time to not everyone that has started with us has ended up to be, a good fit for the positions that they've been put into. So with time they end up, leaving, and then we end up getting someone else. And as I said, I have a great staff that I'm definitely very grateful for. And certainly I couldn't do what I do on the level that I do without all the great people that work for me.
Yeah, I know that would probably be a hard job for me because I'd be at that one tub for 5 minutes staring at the gecko.
Yeah.
How about for...
That's okay, Morgan. We would just put you in the washroom, so you could just wash boxes all day.
As long as there's just a really cool gecko in a tub next to me, then that's fine. I'll just wash the tub.
All right, sounds good.
But feeders on a large scale, do you produce any of your own mealworms or crickets, or what does Steve use for feeders?
Well, we use mealworms. But we go, for the leopard geckos at least, we do feed them some crickets at times, but in general, just a normal non-breeding, juvenile or adult gecko is just going to be fed mealworms. We have our fat tail projects going on a pretty large scale. They are definitely more reliant on crickets than just mealworms, so they need both. All fat tails will eat crickets, but most fat tails will eat mealworms. So we just provide both, and that way everybody's covered. So we go through a lot of mealworms, we go through a lot of crickets. Our knobtails, some of them get roaches, but basically most of them just eat crickets. So we breed our own roaches, but in terms of crickets, in terms of mealworms, at this point we are totally buying everything. At this point I just don't have the space or the manpower to produce my own feeders. But, to be honest, that's a direction that I'm interested in going in the future. It's certainly not hard to breed mealworms. It just kind of takes people to do the work, and it takes space to set it up. So, I spend many tens of thousands on feeders every year, and I would love to be able to capture some of that as by producing it myself rather than giving that out to others, and even more beyond that, it's also a stability issue where we've in the time that I've been breeding geckos, we've gone through a mealworm shortage, we've gone through a cricket shortage. Those were hard times. Back in the day when we had, it was 2008, I think, when we had the mealworm shortage. I mean, that was a really hard time for us. Just having to feed everything crickets. If I was doing, and I was doing it on a much smaller scale then. We're basically just starting in our first facility at that point. So if we had a mealworm shortage, where I couldn't get any mealworms at all, in today's geckos, et cetera, certainly it would be a lot more challenging. So if I had the ability to produce my own feeders and be self-sufficient, where I didn't need to rely, because you never know if a feeder company does go down, if they end up having, a fire or, it ends up, just being closed or sold or whatever, or if they just suddenly decide they're going to change their prices on you, you could have some big problems that the assumptions you're basing your business on could all end up changing, that end up making things more challenging. So anyway, at this point, I'm totally reliant on purchasing from other places, but maybe one day, but certainly at the point I am now, where I just all of our available space is used for geckos. We just don't have the space to do anything in terms of feeder production.
Right on. Well, I'm sure people are done with me asking questions about the husbandry and breeding and feeders. So maybe we should jump into some colorful stuff, like white and yellows. What kind of white and yellows? And where did you get your white and yellows from, and where are you going with them?
I mean, I got all my white and yellow stock originally from Europe. I was one of the original people. I think I brought them into the U.S. about the same time other people did. I didn't necessarily go as hardcore on them to start as at this point. I didn't really know where the white and yellow morph was going to go. So I was breeding them kind of a small scale, playing with them, trying to see what was going to happen. But I didn't take them and breed them into everything, to start. So, but my original stock, I got it from Europe. Got it from several different breeders. I bought my original stock from. So where we're going, it's leopard geckos have changed, and there's so many morphs now. There's so many different combination morphs you can do, and you just really can't do them all anymore. Back in when Enigmas first came out, I was one of the first people to work with those. You could do all the different Enigma crosses, because there were just a limited number of morphs at that time. But anyway, you can't do them all. So, we've kind of had to choose which directions we want to go. We're working on some really cool white and yellow rainwater stuff. I actually just posted some new white and yellow rainwaters to my website just today. So there's some new available ones, definitely some awesome eye candy. Snow white and yellow rainwaters. Actually the cross that we did was pretty interesting and it was actually pretty cool. But anyway, it was white and yellow rainwater bred with a raining red stripe. It was a snow white and yellow rainwater bred raining red stripe. And so what that did for us, we got some striping and jungle influence in there. But additionally, the snows ended up developing some really cool colors, and certainly the non-snows had some really awesome, tangerine and yellow tones to them. Red stripe is definitely one of my favorite morphs to work with. Even if working with the red stripe bloodline or morph, even if you do an outcross with red stripes, you really get some really cool morphs. They don't show the stripe in the first generation, but they do show the color in the first generation. So, you can get some really cool, orange spotted animals doing outcrosses with red stripes. When we were working with enigmas, we called them red spotted enigmas. And some people may have, that have seen my website for years, they may have seen the red spotted enigmas we've produced. And anyway, those were from red stripe outcrosses that we got those. So anyway, white and yellow rainwaters. We're doing white and yellow emerines, which are certainly turning out, it's a Sykes emerine. They're certainly turning out really cool. White and yellow radars, white and yellow raptors. We've done the white and yellow sunburst. We're talking about the sunburst. We've bred those with white and yellow, just to produce some really cool, colorful ones. So, we're, I guess in general, we've done some snow stuff, but in general, we're kind of taking our white and yellows in the colorful directions.
You talked about the emerine. Leopard geckos. What is the difference between the emerine and the emerine Sykes leopard gecko? Sure.
Well, I guess I'll give the history of the Sykes emerine. And that will also explain why I call them the Sykes emerines. Basically, the Sykes emerine it's a line-bred morph. It's something that I developed over many generations of line breeding. And basically, how they started off is started off when I was breeding. Well, back in the day, and this was 2004. Trimper started selling apters, and this was even before he announced what a raptor was. He was selling apters. I guess, wow, that's 10 years ago now. I remember that, remember that day very well, looking at Ron's website when he first announced the apter. But anyway, 10 years ago, time flies. But anyway, we bought some apters, and, I was breeding an apter male to some line-bred super hypo tangerines that I was talking about previously. And what my goal was, raptors and apters, even if they're patternless, they have some very strong jungle genes that are underlying them. And certainly back in the day, it was very true. You would breed, raptor hets and apter hets, and you get some just awesome, crazy jungle patterning. And so my goal was to produce, some stuff I could use for outcrossing, to produce, apters and raptors and all that. But anyway, so I did the apter male bred to the line-bred super hypos. So I was getting, non-albino animals out of it, and I was, seeing, some really good colors. I didn't really, I wasn't really noticing anything too special at that point. But anyway, I took some of those animals and then bred them into my raptor project. This was in subsequent years. But anyway, there was one. Well, as our business grew, in our home, it got to a point that I couldn't take care of all the animals myself, and so my wife was taking care of all of. She was feeding all the geckos, and I was, doing other stuff, doing all the sales and egg collection and all that. Well, anyway, there was one Brox in particular. And these hatched at like the end of one season, where they were raptor hets, and I put these babies away. They were reverse stripes when I put them away. I can't say I remember what they looked like as babies, but anyway, I remember opening this box that was at the end of the season, end of the season babies. I think they hatched like September, maybe even early October. So I hadn't even looked at them because I was too busy selling the animals from the beginning of the season. Everyone wants the big stuff, so I was selling the, May, June, July babies. Anyway, I remember opening this box, and in this box were 3 geckos. They were, they had awesome green reverse stripe patterning. They had, beautiful orange on the sides. And I remember going, wow, these are awesome. These are amazing. And, I brought in my wife and said, why didn't you tell me about these? And she's like, I didn't think there were anything really different. Like, these are unbelievable. These are so cool. And it ended up to be a 1.2. So it was like a perfect, these things just hit me in the face. It's like, wow, this is super special. And to make it even better, it's a 1.2, breeding project right there in front of me. So, this was This was probably 2006, I guess, probably 2006, 2007 maybe. But anyway, you know, I kept these and bred them, and, you know, all I knew is they were special. I didn't know what they were, because nobody had put a name on them. Nobody was really talking about green geckos. You know, so anyway, a year later, Ron Tremper came out with the emerines, and, you know, and I go, wow, all right, well, that's, you know, I have something that looks identical to it. You know, I didn't announce them then. I was, you know, I was working with them, and I wanted to work on them more and refine them before I showed them to anyone. And that's what I did. So anyway, I bred them for you know, a few more years, and then, you know, and then I'm looking at the project going, all right, I'm ready to show these. I'm ready to start selling them. You know, what am I going to call them? And, you know, I thought of different names I could call them, but, you know, certainly within the leopard gecko world, you know, we have our debates on, you know, should this combination morph get its own name, and should this combination morph get its name, and you know, anyway, you know, so I was concerned that if I called them, you know, the whatever, the shamrock tangerines, or, you know, whatever you wanted to call them, you know, giving them a new name, you know, it would just create confusion, you know, in the leopard gecko world by giving them a name that you know, people look at them and they go, well, these look like emerines. Why aren't these emerines? And it's like, well, you know, they look like emerines, but it's, what was important here was that they were totally derived separately. You know, yes, you know, Ron Tremper's bloodlines were 50% of the original founding stock, being that they came from an apter male as the founding father of that project. But on the other hand, they were derived and created totally separate of the emerines. So, you know, I didn't want to impinge on, you know, Ron Tremper's emerine bloodline and call it, you know, call it the same as his, because they weren't. They were, you know, the lineage was totally different. So, you know, just to avoid confusion with giving them a new name, you know, I called them the Sykes emerine. You know, they look like emerines, but they're just totally different in terms of their lineage. So I felt that was just the best way to do it, to represent represent them in the best light.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of times people will, you know, it's not like the emerines. It won't be an emerine unless it came from emerines. But like how you did it, you know, making your own, I think that would really justify it, and especially with all the years of breeding into them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you also have Sykes rainbows. Now, I really like those with all the different colors that they have. Maybe you can tell people how you came about creating a gecko that's just got tons of colors on them. Sure.
You know, I certainly love the rainbows as well. You know, that's definitely a morph I'm very proud of. They, you know, the funny thing is they actually came from the same place as the emerines, and in that they started coming out of my apter and raptor project. And, you know, I was seeing, you know, it was very faint, but I was seeing a little bit of orange striping on the side of some of the animals that came from this project, and I pulled those aside and said, wow, these are cool. You know, I don't know what I can do with these, but I like this. Let's see if I can intensify it. And I just started, you know, breeding that project. And, you know, I mean, looking at some of the results we have now, I would have never, ever thought that we would have been able to get these results that I'm seeing now in terms of the intensity and the clarity of the stripe pattern, you know, that I'm getting now. I would have never thought that I would have been able to have gotten that when I started this project, you know, based on what I started with.
Yeah. So who did you get your original rainbow stuff from?
Well, there was no original rainbow stuff. I mean, I guess, you know, meaning that, you know, it's basically started in my raptor, you know, on my apter and raptor projects. You know, I mean, I bought, you know, when raptors originally, well, when raptors came out, you know, I think I started with 4 animals that were my original founding breeders, you know, back in 2004 when I bought the original stock. And then, I did some outcrossing, into some of the line bred hypos. And then, and that's it basically, so it just, basically it was a spin-off project of, which is, the pure way that line breeding works is you see something, that is slightly different and interesting, and you start breeding it and just see where you can go with it. That's that. So basically, to answer your question, the original stuff came from Raptor and Aptors, but that was 10 years ago that was started, and then they were just little special things. The breeders that started it, and it took generations to get really cool stuff. But the breeders were just cool things that I found in my production that I pulled aside and bred and found got even cooler stuff when you made a selection from their babies.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's interesting that you got so much diversity in colors on them. And you also work with a lot of the wild-caught bloodlines. Maybe you can talk about the different bloodlines that you work with. And
sure. Yeah, we have basically as many different wild-caught bloodlines as I was able to find. I'm certainly interested in leopard geckos from a color and pattern mutation aspect, but certainly I'm also interested in them from a wild caught. The scientist biologist in me is very interested in the wild caught bloodlines. So we basically have we have as much as I could get. And these are all things that I bought from Europe. Basically I just people would I call them what I bought them as originally. But the different bloodlines we have Macularius macularius, we have Macularius fasciolatus, we have 3 different bloodlines of Macularius montanus, and we've only actually started selling one of those bloodlines. The other 2 bloodlines are kind of, we're still doing more work with those, and they're different. They're kind of interesting, and they look different than other montanus, so I've kind of been holding those back, and they don't produce as much as my other montanus bloodline does. But anyway, so 3 different lines of the montanus. We have Macularius afghanicus, we have Turkmenicus, we have Agrameneu. I only have from one locality. I have the Khuzestan province, but I like those a lot. Some of those get absolutely huge. And then we also have Hardwickii. So some one thing I'll mention now, one thing that we are, I'm very interested to see what this result is. But basically I was with all these different subspecies that we have and the different wild caught, pure animals that we have. And I guess one thing to say, all of the wild caught bloodlines, I've been working with them for years, but I've never ever, stuff I sell is pure. We've never bred to anything else. It's always just, you've kept it absolutely pure just to preserve it from a scientific point of view. But anyway, back to what I was saying, we're actually working on a project now with a researcher at University of Minnesota to look at the genetic diversity within the wild-caught bloodlines that we have. So we are, I just recently sent him a bunch of little sample tubes with little tail tip clippings that he's taken the DNA and he's looking at the relatedness, the genetic divergence between the different bloodlines that we have. And so, he got, I gave him all the different bloodlines, the Macularius, fasciolatus, afghanicus, 3 different bloodlines of montanus. I gave him Hardwickii, and also Agrameneu. And actually another interesting thing that I was I'm sure you've heard have you heard the rumor that giants were created by using either fuscus or agromanu. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to debunk this theory. So we will actually have a DNA answer to this. If giants have any agromanu or fuscus bloodline in them. So we're going to compare. We took some tail tip samples from some of the Godzilla giants, and we're going to compare that to agromanu and see if there is indeed any agromanu bloodline. My personal feeling is that there definitely is not any agromanu in giant and in the giants, and certainly this will hopefully prove this once and for all. So anyway, this researcher is still working on the DNA analysis, but I'm anxiously awaiting having some interesting results from his work.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it, people say that like the agromanu, the head patterns, and a lot of their general upper body characteristics resemble a lot of the supergiants.
I would actually disagree with that. Agromanu are actually very different than Macularius in personality, but also in morphology. Agromanu, have a bigger head proportionally than Macularius do, but they have a thinner neck. They're also more long-legged, and they have a shorter, proportionally shorter tail to Macularius. And additionally, they're much quicker. But interestingly, they're not as apt to bite. I've actually never been bit by an agromanu, even though, when you have a gecko in your hand and it's totally freaking out, and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna get bit. It's coming. And oh, there it is. He's biting me pretty good. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with agromanu, you can have one totally freaking out in your hand, and they don't bite. At least in my experience, my bloodline. I don't know about the other localities or other, the other stock that other people worked with. All my agromanu, I got them originally from Europe, so they're not directly related to what other people have in the U.S. But anyway, certainly they're definitely very different. So putting a supergiant next to an agromanu, just the proportions are just totally wrong. That agromanu is, would be present even on a small level of the genetics of a giant Macularius.
Do you think that the fuscus could have any blood inside of the supergiant?
An interesting thing about fuscus, and I don't own any fuscus now, but my understanding is the fuscus that's in captivity aren't necessarily huge. Years ago, before we had agromanu and Hardwicki and fuscus available to us in the reptile industry, everyone was told that fuscus was the largest, and maybe there are localities of fuscus where they're absolutely huge and over 12 inches and all that, but certainly the animals I've seen on the pictures I've seen and the people I've talked to, the fuscus are not the massive 12-inch animals that I was expecting. So I don't know. Fuscus have a different look to them. So I would expect to see some of that pattern, those pattern unique qualities of a fuscus. I would expect to see some of that influence in the supergiants. But you don't see it. A supergiant pattern, the pattern of the biggest of the supergiants is just the same as any other. Certainly, it's not outside of the range of patterns that you would see in just a group of normal high yellows or normal Tremper albinos if you're dealing with an albino supergiant.
Yeah.
I heard you talk about the. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I heard you talk about the Hardwicki.
Yeah.
What makes them different?
Hardwicki is a different species. So, leopard geckos are Eublepharis macularis. Hardwicki, that is their scientific name, is Eublepharis hardwicki. It's an Indian leopard gecko. they're a different species. So they're really cool. I've really enjoyed working with them. This was our second year breeding them, and they've turned out to be very strong and very prolific, and we've certainly enjoyed them. They're very docile, very easy to handle. Care is very similar to leopard geckos. It's kind of they certainly have a fat tail gecko look to them, and their care kind of is a morph between leopard geckos and fat tails. We keep them with a moist hide so that certainly in our racks, we don't, for leopard geckos, we don't have a moist hide for adult animals, but for hardwicki, we do keep a moist hide in there. They seem to like crickets. They'll eat mealworms, but they seem to like crickets a little bit more than just a regular leopard gecko, that's just used to mealworms. But anyway, they're certainly very special animals.
Is it possible to breed them to the leopard geckos or any other species?
I don't know anyone that's done it. You mean hybridize hardwicki with Macularius?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's done it. It's possible. Hybridizing different animals that don't occur geographically together. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it can't work. There's certainly I've seen some crazier things done in terms of hybridizing reptiles. People probably know you can create jungle corns by breeding a corn snake, California king snake. What's just absolutely mind-blowing about that is that they're two different species, number one, but they're from two different genera. And those sorts of things have been done many times over, where people have bred corn snakes to gopher snakes. They bred corn snakes to not just California king snakes to make jungle corns, but a lot of different other king snakes. I've seen gray band hybrids, and it's just mind blowing to be able to for that to work. I don't know anyone who's bred hardwicki to Macularius, but it certainly could be possible, or maybe if there was a chromosome mismatch where one of them had one number of chromosomes, the other one had a different number, then maybe it wouldn't work. They could end up being fertile. They might not end up being fertile. Who knows? So I don't know.
That would be really interesting.
It would be. Certainly if someone is going to do something like that where they're going to be breeding two different species together, from a mad scientific point of view, it would be interesting to know if it could occur. From a preservation of animals within the hobby point of view, certainly if someone was going to do that, it would definitely, people get upset if they're, double albino for triple albino. This is on the same level where this is definitely very critical stuff that if anyone was to do hybridization, certainly it should be done on a very small scale level, and just more for and certainly any offspring that are produced need to be fully disclosed as what their genetic background is, so that someone wasn't going to be taking a 50% or even a 75% hardwicki, 25% Macularius, gecko, and then breeding it back to hardwicki as a breeder, and they're producing very muddied animals, so.
Yeah, it's what I would think would be kind of not exactly similar, but I don't know if you remember Eric Bristow from Oregon Gecko making a Afghan cross to everything. He made the raptors and embers, and would you think that it would be like 2010 with the Afghan raptors, just because hardwicki's so new to the market that you haven't had 10% or 20% of the breeders thinking, hey, can I do hardwicki raptors?
Well, it's actually a totally different case here. Hardwicki is a different species altogether. Afghanicus is a subspecies. So you're still within the same species, So I'm not opposed to that sort of thing. If someone wanted to certainly each of the subspecies have their unique qualities. And to be honest, some of the subspecies validity is in question if they are, some of the original science that was done was very difficult in other words, difficult to discern characters. So in other words, it was based on morphology, scale counts and scale positions and these sorts of things. And some of it there was a bit of overlap between what differentiated one subspecies from another subspecies. So certainly more research could and should be done to see what see if the subspecies are really see what characters differentiate the subspecies. But and anyway, I'm sure you guys have heard before, back in the day when all of the original founding stock for the leopard geckos that we have in captivity now were being imported. Basically they were just being caught wherever and then brought mostly to Pakistan and then exported from there. So I mean, who knows where those original animals came from? So that what we call a leopard gecko in general, our morph leopard geckos that we all love, what we call that is likely a mix of leopard geckos that are from many different localities, which may encompass animals that are from what we would consider different subspecies. And I mean, obviously, there's no at this point there's no way to tell the percentage of fasciolatus or macularis in a radar. You can't figure that out, obviously, but they may be mutts to begin with. So taking, although it was never something that I did myself, taking something like an Afghanicus, which to be honest, Afghanicus are really the most unique of the subspecies. They're smaller. They have some really cool patterning. They just you can definitely tell an Afghanicus from any other one easily. If someone was to give me all the subspecies, I could easily pick out which one was going to be an Afghanicus. But anyway, taking the unique features shown in an Afghanicus and then using that in a morph, like a radar or a raptor or whatever, tangerine or bandit, or that certainly could produce some interesting things. As I said, there's so many different ways you could go with that. I can't do them all. I've chosen not to do any. The only thing I've done is been to breed into snows, because I thought that would make a nicer, whiter snow, was to breed them into the wild-caught bloodlines. So
yeah.
But I guess back to it. So doing something like that with Hardwicki would be totally different, and certainly that would create a very muddied. If you produce a radar, an Afghan radar, at least you can call them Eublepharis macularis. But if you produce a Hardwicki, that would be very very muddied waters.
Yes, that actually brings me to a question that I had, because I recently got a pair of pure Turkmenicus from Pat Klein, and would that be, because I know Turkmenicus isn't a subspecies, so would
Correct.
that be like
Turkmenicus, yeah. I actually just realized that I forgot to mention Turkmenicus in my wild-caught discussion previously. The Turkmenicus are actually that's a really interesting thing, and that actually was another one of the questions that I was looking to answer with this genetic research that we're doing together with the scientists. The honest truth is that the Turkmenicus that we have, that came from one particular breeder, who's a German, and there's a bit of a cloud surrounding them. In how pure they are. Are they indeed Turkmenicus or are they not? And looking at their morphology, they may not be. And so I actually sent a pair of Turkmenicus to this researcher that I'm working with, and as my gift to him for helping me with this. And he keyed them out, and he actually said they almost look like a hybrid between Turkmenicus and Macularius. So what's interesting is that with the DNA that we're doing, we'll be able to confirm that for sure as to what they are, because there is one Turkmenicus sample that a specimen that is in the museum at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, and they have one Turkmenicus. So we will be able to compare the DNA of the geckos that I sent to him to the DNA of these Turkmenicus, and we'll compare them to regular Macularius, and we'll be able to tell for sure if indeed they're pure Turkmenicus, if indeed they're just Macularius, or if they end up to be hybrids of the two. So I don't know. I was hoping, I actually really like the Turkmenicus bloodline. They're very prolific. They're very strong. They actually produce some interesting, we've seen some interesting dark animals that have come out of it. So I was hoping we would either have an answer of they are Turkmenicus or they are Macularius. But in the end, we may end up with they are mutts, and then you end up with oh boy, what do we do now? So anyway, it's certainly if until that question is answered, they are you can just think of them as Turkmenicus. So yes, that would be the same as breeding a Hardwickii to a Macularius, to breed a Turkmenicus to a morph leopard gecko.
Okay. So
they've had, and they've kind of had this cloud surrounding them, and I was just kind of, I like the bloodline, they worked well, but I wanted to answer this to just have it fully clear in my head what indeed they are.
Definitely. So I'd imagine that, I don't know if breeding a Turkmenicus to a Macularius would tell you for sure. Just because if you couldn't hybridize them. Okay, yeah, I didn't think so.
If you can't, if you're not able to hybridize them, meaning if it's not going to be successful, you'd have one of two results, or maybe even three. First result is you're just not going to get any eggs. Meaning it just doesn't work. They're not interested in mating with each other. Mating rituals are different enough. It just doesn't work. Or you could end up getting eggs, but either they're not fertile, or you end up not hatching anything. The babies end up dying developmentally. Or the third result would be that you could end up hatching babies. They grow up fine, but they end up being sterile, like mules, and just can't end up that you can't continue the project because they're useless. They're just not able to do anything.
Yeah. So I know people are messaging me wanting to hear about the giant.
Okay.
Is Godzilla still number one, or do you have some freak over there that's like 200 grams or something?
Well, I guess I do have a bit of news on the Godzilla front. Godzilla actually has died. He ended up dying in mid-October. He died. So anyway, he was a good breeder. He did, produce hundreds and hundreds of babies for me. Hundreds and hundreds, but certainly hundreds. Hundreds of babies for me. He was a great breeder. He did a great job. He definitely was number one. He still is number one. I guess so, however, the bright side is he was breeding well this year. We have some of his sons that are very close to beating his record, and we're hoping that we'll have an announcement soon of a new gecko that is meeting or beating his record. So that's something. Giants are a project we've worked on for years, I certainly love my giants. I was one of the first people to start working with them, and that project has worked out really well for us, and we've had some fantastic results with just, one of my goals is just to keep the giant pure and just shoot for a bigger and bigger animal. But on the other hand, we bred it into raptors and Diablo Blancos, and the good news, one thing we've been working on is trying to get it separated from Tremper albino so that we can end up putting it into other morphs. And the two biggest contenders for Godzilla's successor, for the record, is they're both non-albino. They're head albino. They're both sons of Godzilla. So anyway, with that, we will be able to produce. In the short term, we should finally have the giant separated from Tremper albino, and keep it very close to the largest, as well. That's always been my goal. Is I want to produce as close to the largest gecko. So I always want him to be here and be producing good babies and producing founding stock for my breeding projects where I'm sending him off in different morph directions. But since Godzilla was a Tremper albino, I was kind of locked into that I couldn't get too far from Tremper albino without getting to be great grandchildren of the largest one. So
yeah, we do have some questions in chat. How old was Godzilla?
He hatched in 2007.
So about 7 years old, if I know how to do my math.
7 years. Yeah, right. and another thing, I'm sure people are going to say, and I want to address this because I've seen the forum threads and the discussions on giants, and I take a look at forums and Facebook threads and groups and all that when I can. On the other hand, life is very busy for me. So even if someone is discussing something that I'm very passionate about, I never get a chance to jump into discussions because there's always just so much else. I have 3 kids now too, so there's always something else that's pulling me in another direction. So in a setting like this, I can talk about these things and really get my impressions and experiences out there. But anyway, I've certainly seen the discussions about how giants die early, and I even had a question from a customer recently where they were saying, "Oh, I heard from someone that giants die early," and certainly that is not my experience at all. I have no reason to believe that giants can't live to the same lifespan of any other type, any other morph of leopard gecko. And Godzilla, yes, he was 7 years old when he died. Certainly leopard geckos can live older than that. However, when we breed our geckos, we certainly put them, and I'm not saying we meaning me, I'm saying, we as breeders, when we breed our geckos, we put them at a much higher risk of problems and various things happening and certainly higher levels of stress than if it was just one gecko sitting in a box for, 20 years, eating and pooping and living a peaceful life alone. Yes, that animal is going to live to a much longer age. Godzilla was a fantastic breeder. I mean, at one point he was breeding to like 11 different boxes and getting the job done. As he increased in age, I decreased the number of cages he was bred to, just because I just felt he couldn't keep up, and that's fine. He even into his 7th year he was breeding well. I think Moose was about the same age when he ended up dying, and that that's so. So anyway, certainly if I took Godzilla and kept him away from females, and he lived by himself, who knows how big he would have ended up being. Certainly his heaviest weight was just prior to him starting breeding, and that was 170 grams. And that, once I put him with females, he increased in length. So he was actually, I measured him just as he died, and he was basically just right at a foot. He may have been a little bit loose. I didn't try stretching him out or anything, but he may have been a little bit loose, being that he was dead versus alive. But anyway, certainly he, last I measured him, I think he was, I'm not sure, I'll have to look at what my website says, but anyway, I think it was 11 3/4 was his last live measurement. But anyway, so certainly,
11
and that was
5/8
in a couple years. 11 5/8. Okay, there we go.
11 and 13,
that
16.
Is that what I said? 11 and 13, 16?
Well, it's got both, so we'll just go with 11 and 13, 16. That was the new record as of October 20th, 2010. Yeah.
2010. So, and I mean, I absolutely hate measuring geckos. They do not like being stretched out on a ruler. I absolutely hate it. It's certainly very stressful for them, and, it's never happened, but certainly that's a perfect time for them to snap their tail off. I never measured Godzilla after that 2010 measurement. Just, that day I was very curious and had to know, and I was like, all right, we definitely grew a bit, and anyway, I just chose not to ever mess with him in a measuring capacity since that date. But anyway, if he sat in a cage all by himself, who knows what age he could have lived to. But certainly, as I said, breeding our geckos, we certainly put them in, we expose them to stresses and cause them to have shorter lives. And, I think in general, most people's animals that end up as breeders, if it's a breeder that they actually, continue working with and not, like a breeder that breeds for a few years and then retires out of it, they're going to end up having a shorter life. And it's just an animal that's, if you retire them and then give them the golden years in a cage all by themselves, they bred and then they can live a full life, by themselves. But Godzilla, he's such a special animal that certainly my goal was to work him as long as I felt he was able, and he was still in good shape when he ended up dying. But anyway, we're looking on to the sons that will end up taking the reins and carrying the Godzilla memory and lineage on to the next generations, and yes, I certainly think a 200-gram gecko is possible.
Nice.
Steve, I was looking at your site earlier, and I saw the white knight. What is that? Yep. What kind of game is
Sure,
that?
yeah, the white knight is basically it's the Bell Albino Diablo Blanco. So it is a Bell Albino Eclipse Blizzard. And that's something I was the first to create that, and was the one that named it. And I was actually, I wasn't the first to hatch the Bell Blazing Blizzard, but the first to produce them on a consistent basis. That was a project I basically just worked on, and I just said, I'm not giving up on this. I will win, and I did. It was just a crazy project, and it took a lot more work than you would expect to create a double recessive of the Bell and Blizzard.
Okay.
So and that was the key component in making the White Knight.
Did you find any compatibility issues with the Bell and the Blizzard?
Certainly, and that was what I was referring to. Is in the first generation of producing a double recessive, you breed a Bell Albino to a Blizzard. You hatch all normals. You breed those babies, those normal double hets together, and then you will hatch Blizzards and Bells, and they should all be 66% possible het for the opposite gene. Well, okay, that's really easy. You just basically take you just take a Bell Albino male that's 66% het for Blizzard, and then breed them to the Bell, to the Blizzards that are 66% het for Bell, and you should hatch them, pretty quickly, and then everything is perfect beyond then because everything is confirmed hets. Well, that's not how the project worked for me, and basically the problem was those 66% possible het animals just were not proving out. And it wasn't a case where you could blame someone else. I produced these. I know what their parents were. I know the lineage. They should be genetically 66% possible het. And so for years, I was playing with this and just trying to I produced, lots of animals trying to breed out this, get the double recessive. And I remember one year, I finally got one. It was one year I finally, with all the, I'm not sure how many animals I was working with, but it was, I had, numerous boxes for this project. There are many breeders, but anyway, I think, let's see. Yeah, I was, so like, for example, I was breeding a double het male. I think that's how I was doing it. Breeding a double het male to like bell albinos that are 66% possible het for blizzard. And I was not hatching any, in that one you're hoping to get that blizzard because all the moms are bell albinos, that they're het for bell. Well, I would do that project and I just would not hatch any blizzards that I knew were 100% het for bell. And I just kept going. Well, finally one year, after, and this was after a couple of years of working on it. And I guess another thing to say, at that point I was a garage breeder, working on a smaller level, so I didn't have the ability to produce, hundreds of animals at it. So it was, I have so certainly it was a smaller scale project than how I would work on something like that now. But on the other hand, still there was a lot. It took a lot of time to do it. But anyway, so finally one year I got an animal that I knew was a possible, was a confirmed het. I think it was a bell albino that was confirmed het for blizzard. And then I knew, yes, okay, this is definitely possible. The following year, I bred the same animals, and then I finally hatched my first blazing bell. And that was a key. It was a female, so of course that slowed me down in terms of not having a male that I could breed to all my females. But anyway, that was the key there. And certain other projects that we take as standards, back in the day, people thought these weren't possible. I remember hearing rumors back in the day that it wasn't possible to make a Tremper blazing blizzard. There was a breeder that was trying to produce them that, they even had an artist's rendition of what it was supposed to look like on their website. It was supposed to be an all-white animal with blazing red eyes, and, they named it even before they hatched it. And they even had an artist's rendition, which I thought was crazy. But anyway, they had some problems producing it, and I had heard there were many, many animals that were produced, in the process of trying to get that first one, and it should be a simple 1 out of 16, from breeding the double hets together, but it just wasn't. And, so I other things like Tremper patternless albino, years ago, there was a rumor that wasn't possible. And now, certainly it's been proven to be possible. Rainwater blazing blizzard, the same deal. Just doesn't adhere to the normal 1 out of 16 probabilities that you would expect. So anyway, other projects are certainly very simple. Like if you wanted to produce a rainwater patternless albino, that's an easy one. That you'll definitely get 1 out of 16 probabilities for trying to produce the double het, or trying to produce a double recessive, from double hets. So
yeah.
Anyway, but for me, once I had that key of having that blazing bell, then from that, using that animal, I was able to produce it, and it's perfect. I mean, it works according. There is no genetic mystery to it anymore. It's if I breed a blazing bell to an unrelated bell albino, I'm going to produce I'm going to produce binos that are het for blizzard. I'm going to take those two, and if I was to breed two of those bell albinos together, 1 out of 4 would be a blazing bell. So once that, it almost seems like there was something, and I don't necessarily know that this is the case, but it almost seemed like there was almost like another level to it where a crossover had to happen that lined up the bell and the blizzard, and then that allowed, once that had been done, and then if all the animals were related, or if you use that animal for future generations, then you already have your kind of extra, I don't want to say mutation because it's not a mutation, but that extra, I don't know what the word is, but anyway, you have it at that point, and then you can use it, and then it works from that point on. And certainly, genetically and physically, they're strong. I haven't had any problems with them. They production is good, and strength is good, and size is good, and it's been a good bloodline. It's been a good project.
Yeah. Do you think that might be one of the issues that's holding up the Murphy patternless bells?
I haven't played with that project, and I haven't talked to directly to people that are working on that project regarding that project. But I would assume they probably are either they're not working on it on high numbers, or it's a similar issue where it just takes a lot of byproduct animals in order to finally get the one that's your key to moving to the next level.
Yeah, it kind of seems like they'd all be pulled all their hair out by now, because I think that's been going on a lot longer than doing the blizzards and bells.
Mhm.
Just from what I hear from people talking.
I did that years ago, and I did that kind of quietly too. So I pulled my hair out on that for many generations that nobody knew about.
Oh, geez. So I guess since we've got 20 minutes left, we should jump into fat tails or knobtails or hog-nosed snakes or something before people start sending me hate mail. Well, certainly. Do you have any? I guess you lead me. Let's go. Let's do fat tails.
Sure.
And I know that a specific question in the chat was amel whiteout, if that's an issue.
Okay. Sure.
And
that's it's interesting how I was talking about how Tremper the rumor was Tremper patternless albinos couldn't be created years ago, and obviously that's been proven wrong. Amel whiteouts certainly was a rumor that couldn't be done, but no, that's been proven wrong. It's a bit of I've had some experience with this project, so I can speak to it directly, but it's still one we're working on and trying to figure out. I remember years ago, we tried breeding a whiteout male to an amel female, because that was almost a cheaper way to do it, meaning you want your more expensive animal to be your male and your less expensive animal, your amel, to be your female, because you can. Well, anyway, that's the way we did the project, was whiteout male to amel female, and it didn't work. We were getting a lot of deformity, deformed babies. We were getting, and certainly, JMG had the same results. Well, anyway, a friend of mine in Malaysia, I remember, this picture clearly. He posted a picture on Facebook of him breeding a amel male to a whiteout female, and I was like, man, why are you doing that? Whiteouts, I don't remember how much they were, but certainly they were more valuable than amels, and I'm thinking, man, why are you doing that? Breed it to an Oreo, breed it to just breed it to something, make whiteouts. You're not even going to get any good babies out of this. What are you doing? And he had some caption kind of saying I don't know. Well, it's almost like I know we shouldn't do this, but screw it. I'm gonna do it. And kind of like prove me wrong. And anyway, so he ended up getting fertile eggs and babies and whiteouts, and so certainly, and he's not the only one to have repeated these results. So certainly it is possible, and we've worked on this project now, and we have good babies. We've bred, we do have whiteouts that are heifer amel. I'm not sure exactly how big they are right now, but hopefully we can produce some whiteout amels this next year. I'm not sure if there's any tweaking that we need to do with it in terms of if it makes a difference as to which animal is the male and which animal is the female. I don't know. It may have been, so my impression is that if you wanted to do it, you need to bring the whiteout and the amel together by breeding an amel male with a whiteout female. That would work, but a whiteout male to an amel female doesn't work. So it may, but that may be true. That may not be true. It may be that just my project didn't work and JMG's project didn't work, but it may indeed be possible. Other things that are interesting. It almost seems like the amel has been toxic when bred to other morphs. We tried an A-male Oreo project. That didn't work very well. We were, getting some deformed little frog-like looking things that, just didn't hatch. So we stopped that project. But I just saw recently that, another breeder has an A-male Oreo on their website. So it is possible. Maybe they did it, they did it in a different way and we didn't do it, but I don't know. We haven't continued our A-male Oreo project. It's just there's, so many projects to do that I'd certainly be very happy for to work on that, but we haven't restarted that one yet. So it's appearing that the A-male gene is not as necessarily as toxic as we considered it just a few years ago, when bred to other morph fat tails.
That's good for a lot of the people wanting. I know that everybody started out with A-males pretty much. I mean, that was pretty much the most pumped out morph to begin with, wasn't it?
Well, the thing is they've really just been around for much longer than any of the other morphs. Maybe even back in the 90s. I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't breeding fat tails at that point, so I don't remember the day when the first female was released. But they've certainly been around a long time. And it's a beautiful, wonderful morph. So I think they're just much more common, just because of the duration that they've been available. Even though there's still a demand for A-males, and we really never can produce enough of them. We always sell out of A-males.
Yeah. And the breeding of the fat tails, is that a whole lot different than leopard geckos?
Yes and no. It's similar breeding in terms of one male to up to 3 females in a 28-quart box. They're a little bit different in terms of their cooling. They end up to may not even need the cooling in the same way that we think leopard geckos do. I'm a very seasonal breeder, so I like to. Or at least, I like to have control of my seasons. I'm actually doing some reverse-cycling stuff where I'm producing babies. We have babies hatching now that are from our reverse-cycling rooms, that are, their parents didn't start their breeding season until like June, just because they were previously being hibernated. But anyway, fat tails, we have some fat tails now that have started their fall season. We have kind of the fall season and then the winter season breeders, winter-spring season breeders, and the fall season breeders, they weren't cooled, they didn't have any stimulus other than even our facility temperature was the same. We kept the males in the cage, during the off season, so they were kind of living together all summer. But they just kind of started ovulating, started breeding, and we look in the cage and go, bam, these guys are ready to go. They're waiting for us, to start collecting their eggs. We didn't, they even turned on before we were expecting them. So they did their, they got their stimulus either from the light or just from the duration, from the last breeding, or maybe there's temperature cues. Our facility is, we're quite precisely climate controlled, so. Maybe they were starting to sense a little bit of a nighttime cooling that was setting them off. But in general, most of our fat tails do go kind of on the same season as leopard geckos. Kind of a January through May, June is kind of their peak laying season. One thing that's interesting about fat tails is they work themselves really hard during the breeding season. They pump out their eggs really fast. And they don't lay they're not as prolific as leopard geckos, so they don't lay quite as many eggs. But they can, we've had situations where a female, starts her breeding season and finishes her breeding season even before her first baby is born. They can be producing eggs like, even every 2 weeks. And just, she's going to lay 4 clutches. She's got it all done in 2 months, even before the first baby hatches. So, anyway. That's one of the big differences. But in general, in terms of the setup and all that, it's quite similar.
That's pretty cool. We do have a question in the chat. They want, before we have to go, they want to know about a Nephirus asper project that you're working on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, asper is one of the knobtail geckos. We're not working with them on a large scale. We have kind of a small scale project. They're still kind of, definitely one of the rarer of the knobtail species. I don't even, if someone said they wanted a pair, I'd have to say, well, it'll be a while, because it's a project we're kind of working on very slowly. I mean, they're, in terms of care, they're definitely very similar to amii. They're definitely not as prolific as amii. Amii is really that's one of the ones that I've really done the most work with. Of the knobtail species that we work with, and definitely that's my favorite too. So, anyway, yeah, I mean, that's asper. Unless they have any other specific follow-up questions for me.
No, I think that was about it.
Sure.
But yeah, so maybe we could touch a little bit on the knobtail geckos and
sure
what projects you're working with, or if I know we've only got 10 minutes, so if you wanted any sales that are coming up, anything you want to promote your website or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I did want to mention that. Yeah, we are, well, I guess, it's only, 8 days left in the month of November. But for the month of November, we are doing a buy two, get one free sale for leopard geckos and fat-tailed geckos that are on our website. So, if anyone wants to, jump in on that, 8 more days left. Still has to be completed within the month of November. And they have to mention November deal in either their order form or their email correspondence to us to get that deal.
Awesome. So, Steve, did you want to close with any good advice for future breeders or anything like that? That people that are wanting to try to get to your level. If you've got any advice for them.
I don't. It's funny because I don't know if I would advise. Say that again.
Don't compete with Steve.
Well, it's interesting because certainly I've had a lot of fun doing what I do. I have a great time. Working on this level and having this many projects and interacting with all the people that I do and going to places that I do. I was talking about this a little bit when I got cut off before, so I'm not sure how much of it actually got heard. But it's certainly a challenge to get to this level. It certainly takes a lot of luck, a lot of hard work, a lot of just blood, sweat, and tears. And I've shed all of those as a result of getting here. So keeping things on a smaller scale allows you for more sanity in life. There's a lot for me to manage on a daily basis. I certainly wouldn't trade it for the world. And for me, this is who I am, and I couldn't do anything else for a business. As I was saying before, I've had reptiles ever since I was 4 years old. So, I've been a reptile person from day one, and really the people, if you look at kind of the people that are successful in reptiles, they're the people in general, and certainly there are exceptions to it, but in general, they're people that are diehard, tried and true, herpers from the start. They just have that inner interest, in them that they just love reptiles and always have and could really never do anything else. That's the type of drive that someone needs to really see a business through and to go, to really take it to the level that they really could. because there are a lot of tough times. There's a lot of sacrifices that need to be made, in the process of getting there, and even just on a daily basis, there's a lot of sacrifices that are made. So it's certainly been fun, and I love it. But for other people, it's certainly not for everyone. I guess that's the best way to say it. Is breeding on a large scale and managing things on a large scale. It's certainly not for everyone. It's and as you see, people come and go in the reptile business, and they have big dreams and end up not really working out the way they want. But keeping it on a small scale and keeping it to be a hobby that pays for itself and brings in some money on top of it is at times a more fun way. As I said, I don't really get as much hands-on time with the animals as I would like anymore. It's gotten to a level that there's so many other directions I'm getting pulled in that other people take care of the animals perfectly, and they've been trained by myself and my other staff, so they got it under control. But on the other hand, I don't necessarily, I don't have too many. Here's another thing: I don't have too many reptile pets anymore. Back in the day, I used to have one of this and one of that, and that species is cool. I want to get that, and now everything has to be just breeder animals. And I kind of look forward to the day when I can be retired, and when that'll be, because I'm the type that just I can see myself working until the end. And always being, I love what I do. But anyway, kind of being at a point where I can be like, that species has always fascinated me. I would just love to get some and just play with them. I just haven't had that luxury, at the point where I am now. I've kind of had spin-off projects where I play with a species for a while, and but they kind of have to get into them for a reason. Where I think there's a reason to get into them, not just, okay, that species is cool, I really want to get a whole bunch of them. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for coming on, and we'll have to get you back on to cover the hognose and the rest of the fat tails and the nephrid.
Yeah, definitely.
Species.
Yeah, this was fun.
All
I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
All right, and we'll talk to you later, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Thanks to both of you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. So, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. This show was brought to you by our generous sponsors, Luxurious Leopard, Holly's Homebird Reptiles, Top-Notch Leopard Geckos, Fire Nice Geckos, Designer Geckos, and SD Geckos. And don't forget to check out the new cutting-edge Leopard Gecko book by Ray Roner of Designer Geckos called The Leopard Gecko Advisor, available now on Amazon. Or for a signed copy, go to their website at designergeckos.com. Or if you want a signed copy, go over to the Gecko blog tonight and tomorrow and probably Monday, and you'll find a Late Night Leo's picture on there. Go ahead and tag Gary in that picture, and then pick a number between 1 and 1,000. You have to make sure that you tag Gary and pick your number, and good luck winning. So, yeah. Anybody have any other questions? Yeah. You should. Yeah. I don't know if Ray even listens.
It's not hard. Someone go do it.
You should. And I will too, just because I'll tell them that I wasn't on the show tonight and that I should win. But yeah, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight, and thank you, Stan, for being my co-host.
Yeah, thank you for having me on too.
All right, we'll talk to you all later. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.